Hello there, my dreamy friends. Tonight, we journey to the shores of the Black Lake, but not to witness great magical duels or underwater adventures you might expect. Instead, we're settling into the gentle rhythm of wick trimming, oil refilling, and the quiet vigilance of those who keep the lights burning when darkness falls over the Scottish Highlands. We're exploring the peaceful, methodical world of lantern maintenance, a world where the most exciting thing you'll encounter is a particularly stubborn wick or a lantern glass that needs extra polishing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video if you enjoy these gentle journeys into the quieter corners of magical legend, and subscribe if you'd like more stories that find the beautifully mundane within the extraordinary. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights, perhaps listen to the gentle lapping of water against stone, and let's ease into tonight's tale together. Tonight, you won't be casting spells or attending magical classes. You won't be fighting dark wizards or uncovering ancient mysteries. Instead, you'll be the keeper of something far more fundamental, the steady glow of lanterns that guide students safely across dark waters, that mark the boundaries between the known and unknown, and that provide comfort to those who venture out onto the Black Lake after sunset. Your story as the Hogwarts Boathouse lantern keeper doesn't begin with magical prowess. It begins with the quiet satisfaction of lights burning steadily, wicks trimmed properly, and the knowledge that your work ensures safe passage for anyone who needs to cross these ancient waters. You are not the hero of this tale, nor are you the villain. You are something far more essential and far more overlooked. The one who tends, the one who watches, the one who quietly ensures that the lights never fail when they're needed most. So settle in, close your eyes, and let's explore a life lived in the gentle glow of lantern light, where every evening brings its own small rituals, and every dawn reveals the quiet satisfaction of vigilance maintained through the dark hours. Part 1. Assignment to the Lake. Your path to the Hogwarts Boathouse doesn't begin with grand magical destiny or dramatic discovery of hidden talents. It starts on a grey September morning in 1987, when you stand outside the gates of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry with a worn travelling bag and a letter of employment that simply states, Groundskeeping Assistant, Marine Facilities, begin September 15th. You're 19, fresh from completing your magical education at a smaller wizarding school in Wales, with grades that were respectable but not remarkable, and magical abilities that tend toward the practical rather than the spectacular. While your former classmates pursue careers in the ministry or St. Mungo's, you've chosen something quieter, a position that promises steady work, room and board, and the chance to be part of the most famous magical institution in Britain, even if only in the margins. The letter came through an advertisement in the Daily Prophet's employment section, wedged between notices for dragon handlers in Romania and curse breakers in Egypt. Groundskeeping position available at Hogwarts School. Experience with marine environments preferred. Quiet, reliable applicant sought for independent work. Apply to Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds. Your interview with Hagrid took place in his hut on a warm August afternoon, over tea that was strong enough to wake the dead and rock cakes that nearly broke your teeth. He was a gentle giant who seemed more interested in your character than your magical qualifications, asking questions about your comfort with solitary work, your experience around water, and your ability to maintain equipment without constant supervision. The boathouse position's been empty for 2 years, he explained, gesturing toward the lake with a massive hand. Last fellow couldn't handle the isolation. Gets lonely down there, especially in winter. But the work's important. All those lanterns need tending, Boats need maintaining, and someone needs to keep an eye on things after dark. Strange things happen on the lake sometimes, and it helps to have someone reliable watching over it. The marine facilities turned out to be the boathouse where first-year students traditionally cross the Black Lake on their arrival at Hogwarts, along with a collection of maintenance buildings, storage sheds, and most importantly, the network of lanterns that mark safe passages, illuminate the shoreline, and provide navigation aids for anyone traveling the lake after sunset. Your quarters are in a small apartment above the main boathouse, accessible by a narrow staircase that creaks with age and damp. The rooms are simple but comfortable. A sitting area with a fireplace, a bedroom with a window overlooking the lake, a small kitchen, and a workroom where you'll maintain the lanterns and store supplies. The walls are thick stone that keeps the interior cool in summer and warm in winter, while the windows provide views across the Black Lake toward the castle that will become the center of your daily routine. The previous lantern keeper, a wizard named Aldrich Moorcock, who'd held the position for 30 years before retiring to tend a garden in Devon, left behind detailed notes about the work. His handwriting fills dozens of logbooks with observations about weather patterns, maintenance schedules, and the peculiar behaviors of the lake's magical inhabitants. The lanterns are more than just light sources, his notes explain in careful script. They're part of the lake's magical ecosystem, connected to protective enchantments that have been maintained for centuries. Each one has its own personality, its own requirements, and its own way of responding to the magical currents that flow through these waters. The network consists of 47 lanterns positioned around the lake's perimeter, plus another dozen that mark underwater hazards and safe channels for boat traffic. Some are mounted on posts driven deep into the lakebed, others hang from brackets attached to ancient trees, and a few float freely but remain stationary through positioning charms that must be renewed monthly. Your first week involves learning the location and characteristics of each lantern under Hagrid's patient guidance. He rows you around the lake in an ancient wooden boat, pointing out landmarks and explaining the maintenance requirements for different types of fixtures. "That one there," he says, indicating a brass lantern mounted on a post near the castle's edge, "burns brighter during exams. Students study by its light, and it seems to know when they need extra illumination. This group here," he gestures toward 3 copper lanterns near the Forbidden Forest, "they dim automatically when dangerous creatures approach the shore. Been doing it for decades, though no one knows exactly why." The work requires both magical and mundane skills. You learn to trim wicks with precision, to mix lamp oil with the proper additives for different weather conditions, and to clean lens assemblies using techniques that prevent magical residue from clouding the glass. But you also learn basic spells for relighting extinguished flames, protective charms that prevent lanterns from being damaged by weather or wildlife, and diagnostic magic that reveals when mechanical components need attention. The daily routine establishes itself quickly. Morning rounds to check each lantern's condition and fuel levels. Afternoon maintenance work on any fixtures that need attention. And evening lighting ceremonies that ensure all lanterns are burning properly before darkness falls. The work is solitary, but not lonely, accompanied by the gentle sounds of water against stone and the distant calls of lake-dwelling creatures. As your first month progresses, you begin to understand why the previous keeper found meaning in this quiet work. There's something deeply satisfying about maintaining lights that guide and protect, about being part of an ancient system that has functioned reliably for centuries, and about knowing that your diligence ensures safe passage for anyone who ventures onto these dark waters. Part 2. Learning the lake's rhythms. As autumn settles over the Scottish Highlands and your second month begins, you start to understand that the Black Lake is less a body of water than a living entity with moods, currents, and seasonal patterns that affect every aspect of your work. The lanterns you tend aren't just sources of illumination. They're part of a complex magical ecosystem that responds to weather, moon phases, and the subtle energies that flow through Hogwarts' ancient grounds. Your daily routine has evolved into a comfortable rhythm that begins before dawn with a cup of tea on the boathouse's small balcony, watching mist rise from the lake's surface while planning the day's maintenance tasks. The early morning hours are your favorite time, when the water is glass smooth and reflects the castle's towers with perfect clarity, creating the illusion that two Hogwarts exist, one above and one below. The lanterns themselves have begun to reveal their individual personalities through weeks of careful observation. The brass fixtures near the castle tend to burn steadily and require minimal adjustment, their flames protected by enchantments that seem to strengthen during term time. The copper lanterns positioned along the wilder shorelines are more temperamental, flickering when storms approach and sometimes extinguishing themselves entirely during the new moon. Your favorite is an ornate silver lantern mounted on a floating platform near the lake's center, officially designated as Navigation Aid 7 in the maintenance logs, but which you've privately named Stella, for the way its light seems to dance like a star reflected on water. Stella requires weekly attention. Her positioning charms need renewal, her oil burns faster than others, and her flame occasionally shifts color from warm yellow to cool blue without apparent cause. The work has taught you to read weather patterns with an accuracy that would impress professional meteorologists. Certain lanterns dim hours before storms arrive, their flames sensing atmospheric pressure changes that human instruments can't detect. Others brighten when the temperature drops, as if responding to the increased need for warmth and light during cold Highland nights. October brings the first serious storms of the season, and with them, your first real test as Lantern Keeper. A 3-day gale roars down from the mountains, driving rain horizontally across the lake and generating waves that crash against the boathouse with enough force to shake your apartment above. You spend the storm's duration in waterproofs and boots, checking and rechecking the lanterns that remain accessible, trimming wicks that gutter in the wind, and replacing glass chimneys shattered by flying debris. The floating lanterns prove most challenging during severe weather. Several break free from their positioning charms and must be retrieved using a small boat that pitches wildly in the choppy water. Your magical abilities, while modest, prove adequate for the basic spells needed to guide wayward lanterns back to their proper positions and renew the enchantments that keep them stationary. But the storm also reveals the deeper purpose of your work. On the second night, as wind howls around the boathouse and rain lashes the windows, you notice 3 lanterns on the lake's far shore pulsing in unison with urgent red light. According to Moorcock's notes, this pattern indicates someone in distress on or near the water. You launch the emergency boat despite dangerous conditions, following the lantern's guidance across dark water toward the Forbidden Forest's edge. There you find 2 7th-year students who had attempted a romantic moonlight row and become stranded when their boat was damaged by debris. The lantern's warning system allows you to locate them quickly and guide them back to safety, though not before delivering a stern lecture about attempting lake crossings during severe weather. The incident establishes your reputation among the student body as someone reliable and competent, though also somewhat stern about water safety. Word spreads that the new Lantern Keeper takes his responsibilities seriously and won't hesitate to venture out in dangerous conditions when someone needs help. Your relationship with the castle's staff also develops during these early months. You coordinate with Professor McGonagall on arrangements for official lake crossings, work with the groundskeeping crew on shoreline maintenance projects, and occasionally assist Hagrid with tasks involving the lake's magical inhabitants. The latter proves particularly interesting, as you learn about the Grindylows that inhabit the deeper waters, the school of magical fish that migrate through the lake seasonally, and most memorably, the giant squid that sometimes surfaces near the lanterns on calm evenings. The squid seems curious about your maintenance work, occasionally extending a tentacle to gently touch lantern posts while you work, as if offering assistance or simply observing human activity. Evening rounds become a form of moving meditation as you row from lantern to lantern, checking fuel levels, adjusting wicks, and ensuring that each light burns steadily through the night. The work requires attention to detail, but also provides time for reflection, allowing your mind to wander while your hands perform familiar tasks. The solitary nature of the work suits your temperament perfectly. You've never been comfortable in large groups or social situations, preferring the company of books, tools, and the gentle creatures that inhabit the lake's edges. The Lantern Keeper's life provides purpose without pressure, responsibility without the constant oversight that would make you anxious. As November approaches and the days grow shorter, you realize that you've found something unexpected in this quiet position. Not just employment, but a calling that combines practical skills with magical purpose, solitary work with community service, and daily routine with the satisfaction of maintaining something beautiful and essential. Part 3. Winter's Deep Watch. Winter transforms the Black Lake into a different world entirely, and with it, your role as Lantern Keeper takes on new dimensions of challenge and responsibility. The Scottish Highlands in December are harsh and unforgiving, with temperatures that drop well below freezing, and winds that howl down from the mountains, with enough force to extinguish poorly maintained flames. The lanterns require different care during the cold months. Oil that burns perfectly in autumn temperatures becomes thick and sluggish when frost settles over the lake. Wicks that draw fuel efficiently in mild weather need frequent adjustment when the viscosity changes. Most challenging of all, the glass chimneys that protect flames from wind become brittle in extreme cold, cracking at the slightest impact and requiring replacement with specially treated glass that can withstand temperature fluctuations. Your daily routine adapts to winter's demands. Morning rounds begin while stars still shine, your breath forming clouds in the frigid air as you check each lantern for ice damage, fuel consumption, and flame stability. The floating lanterns require particular attention, as ice forming around their bases can affect their positioning charms and cause them to drift from their assigned locations. The lake itself behaves differently in winter. Ice forms along the shoreline in intricate patterns that seem to follow magical currents rather than simple temperature gradients. Some areas remain unfrozen, even in the deepest cold, their waters kept liquid by thermal springs or protective enchantments. Other sections freeze solid enough to walk on, though you quickly learn to test ice thickness carefully after nearly falling through a deceptively thin patch near the castle. December brings your first experience with what Moorcock's notes describe as deep winter phenomena, magical events that occur only during the year's darkest months. Certain lanterns begin burning with flames that shift color throughout the night, cycling from gold to silver to pale blue in patterns that seem to follow celestial movements. Others develop the ability to project their light much farther than should be physically possible, creating pools of illumination that extend deep into the Forbidden Forest or far across the lake's surface. The most remarkable winter phenomenon involves the aurora-like displays that sometimes appear above the lake on the coldest, clearest nights, Sheets of green and purple light dance across the sky, but only when viewed from specific lantern positions. Moving even a few feet breaks the optical effect, suggesting that the lanterns themselves play a role in focusing or amplifying whatever magical energies create these displays. Your workroom becomes a haven during the harshest weather, warmed by a fireplace that burns with ordinary flames supplemented by a small heating charm you've learned to maintain reliably. Here, you spend storm-bound afternoons cleaning lantern components, repairing damaged glass chimneys, and studying Moorcock's detailed observations about seasonal patterns and maintenance techniques. The isolation deepens during winter months as fewer people venture near the lake except for essential activities. Students largely abandon their casual lakeside wandering in favor of warmer indoor pursuits. Even Hagrid limits his visits to emergency situations or urgent maintenance consultations. For days at a time, you see no one except at a distance when castle windows glow with warm light that makes your own lanterns seem pale by comparison. But the solitude also brings unexpected rewards. Wildlife that remains hidden during busier seasons becomes visible to patient observation. You learn to recognize the calls of winter birds that nest in lakeside trees, the splashing patterns of fish that remain active beneath the ice, and the subtle signs that indicate when larger magical creatures are moving through the area. The giant squid makes fewer appearances during cold weather, but when it does surface, the encounters feel more significant. On one memorably clear December night, you're trimming the wick of Navigation Aid 7 when the squid emerges nearby, its massive form breaking the surface with surprisingly little disturbance. For several minutes, you work in companionable silence while the creature watches, its large eyes reflecting lantern light with what seems like intelligent curiosity. Christmas at Hogwarts brings special responsibilities for the lantern keeper. Students who remain at school over the holidays sometimes request evening boat trips to view the lanterns from the water, requiring you to coordinate with school staff and ensure that all lights burn with extra brightness and reliability. The castle's holiday decorations reflect in the lake's surface, creating magical displays that draw photographers and artists who appreciate your assistance in positioning boats for optimal viewing angles. New Year's Eve involves the only large gathering you host all year, as tradition allows students and staff to gather at the boathouse for midnight, when all lanterns are synchronized to burn with pure white flames as the calendar changes. The effect is spectacular. 47 points of brilliant light surrounding the lake like earthbound stars. Their illumination so intense that it briefly turns night into day. Your role during this celebration is purely technical, ensuring that all lanterns receive fresh oil, clean wicks, and perfect adjustment, so that the synchronized lighting proceeds flawlessly. But standing on the boathouse dock as hundreds of people count down to midnight, watching your carefully maintained lights create a moment of shared wonder, provides satisfaction that more than compensates for months of solitary work. As January begins and the celebration crowds disperse, you settle back into winter's quiet routine with renewed appreciation for your role as keeper of these essential lights. The work continues through snow, ice, and bitter wind, but each morning that finds all lanterns burning steadily feels like a small victory against the darkness and cold that define Highland winters. Part 4: Spring's Awakening and Student Encounters. March brings the first hints that winter's grip on the Highlands is beginning to weaken, though you've learned not to trust early signs of spring in Scotland. The lake ice retreats gradually from the shorelines, leaving behind tide lines marked with dead reeds and small debris that require cleanup before the warmer months bring increased foot traffic around the water's edge. Your daily maintenance rounds reveal changes that have occurred beneath winter's concealment. Several lantern posts near the Forbidden Forest show damage from what appear to be large claws. evidence that some of the forest's inhabitants have been using the fixtures for scratching posts during your absence. 2 floating lanterns have drifted significantly from their assigned positions, their positioning charms weakened by months of ice pressure and temperature fluctuation. The lanterns themselves seem to sense the changing season. Flames that burned with the steady, practical light of winter begin showing more variation in color and intensity. Some develop what you can only describe as playful characteristics, flickering in response to bird calls, brightening when you approach, or occasionally synchronizing their pulse patterns with nearby fixtures in ways that suggest communication rather than malfunction. Spring cleaning becomes a major project as you systematically service each lantern, replacing components worn by winter weather and adjusting mechanisms that have shifted during the freeze-thaw cycles. The work is satisfying in the way that seasonal renewal always is, taking something weathered and worn and restoring it to optimal condition through patience and careful attention. But spring also brings the return of human activity around the lake, and with it, your first substantial interactions with the student body since the winter holidays. As the weather warms and daylight hours extend, students begin venturing outside for studies, social gatherings, and the general restlessness that seems to affect teenagers when confined indoors for too many months. Your first significant student encounter occurs on a warm April evening when you're conducting routine maintenance on the lanterns near the castle. A group of 5th-year Gryffindors approaches, led by a confident girl with bushy brown hair, who immediately begins asking detailed questions about your work. How do the lanterns stay lit in strong winds? She wants to know. What kind of oil do you use? Are the flames purely magical, or do they follow normal combustion principles? Do you think the positioning charms could be modified to create moving light displays? Her curiosity is both refreshing and overwhelming after months of solitary work. You find yourself explaining wick trimming techniques, oil additives, and the basic theory behind weather protection charms to an audience that hangs on every word with genuine interest. The girl, Hermione, you learn, takes notes in a small leather journal and asks follow-up questions that demonstrate real understanding of the technical principles involved. This encounter establishes a pattern that continues throughout spring. Students begin approaching with questions about the lanterns, requests for assistance with lake-related projects, and occasionally problems that require your intervention. You help a group of 2nd years retrieve a valuable telescope that fell from a tower window into shallow water. You provide technical advice for a 7th year's independent study project on aquatic, magical phenomena. Most memorably, you assist with the search for a lost pet niffler that had apparently been attracted to the shiny brass fittings on several lantern bases. The interactions reveal that your reputation among students has evolved during your months of service. You're known as competent and reliable, but also as someone who takes his responsibilities seriously and expects others to respect the equipment and safety procedures that keep the lake area functional. Students approach with a mixture of curiosity and caution that suggests word has spread about your no-nonsense attitude toward water safety. One particularly memorable encounter occurs during a warm May evening, when you discover 2 7th-year students attempting to modify one of the floating lanterns for what they describe as a romantic enhancement to their study location. The modification involves attaching colored filters that would create mood lighting for their outdoor revision sessions. While you appreciate their creativity, the unauthorized alteration could affect the lantern's navigation function and potentially create hazards for other lake users. The conversation that follows becomes a teaching moment about the interconnected nature of the lantern system and the importance of maintaining standardized lighting for safety purposes. The students, a Ravenclaw girl named Lisa and a Hufflepuff boy named Marcus, prove receptive to explanation and volunteer to help with legitimate maintenance work as compensation for their modification attempt. Over several evenings, they assist with routine cleaning and wick trimming, while you explain the history and function of the lantern network. These assistants reveal aptitudes that prove genuinely helpful. Lisa has an intuitive understanding of the mathematical relationships between lantern positioning and optimal light coverage. Marcus demonstrates remarkable patience for detail work and an ability to spot potential problems before they become serious. By the end of May, you've established an informal apprenticeship program that provides you with capable help while giving interested students hands-on experience with practical magical applications. The student interactions also provide perspective on your own adaptation to life at Hogwarts. You realize that you've developed local expertise and institutional knowledge that others value, even though your formal magical education was unremarkable. The combination of technical competence, practical experience, and familiarity with the lake's unique characteristics has created a niche where your modest talents become genuinely useful. As the school year draws toward its close and exam period approaches, you notice increased activity around the lakeside lanterns during evening hours. Students seem to find the gentle, steady light conducive to outdoor study sessions, especially for subjects requiring quiet concentration. Several lanterns develop the curious habit of burning slightly brighter during these study sessions, as if responding to the focused mental energy of their human companions. The academic year ends with the traditional departure of graduating students, several of whom stop by the boathouse to thank you for assistance rendered during their time at Hogwarts. These brief conversations provide unexpected satisfaction, revealing that your quiet work has been noticed and appreciated by those you've helped along the way. Part 5. Summer maintenance and deeper understanding. Summer at Hogwarts brings a different rhythm to your work, as the academic year's urgency gives way to the measured pace of deep maintenance and system improvements. With most students gone and castle activity reduced to essential staff, you have the freedom to undertake projects that would be impossible during term time: comprehensive overhauls, experimental modifications, and the kind of detailed attention that keeps complex systems functioning reliably year after year. The summer maintenance schedule follows routines established by your predecessor, but refined through your own experience with the lantern network's quirks and requirements. Each fixture receives complete disassembly, cleaning, and inspection, with worn components replaced and mechanical adjustments made to optimize performance for the coming academic year. The work reveals how much you've learned during your first year as keeper. Components that once seemed mysterious now yield their secrets to systematic investigation. You understand why certain lanterns require monthly wick adjustments, while others burn steadily for months without attention. You recognize the subtle signs that indicate when positioning charms need renewal, when oil mixtures require seasonal modification, and when glass components are developing stress fractures that could lead to failure. But summer also brings your first opportunity to experiment with improvements to the existing system. Working from suggestions in Moorcock's notes and your own observations of operational patterns, you begin testing modifications that could enhance reliability, reduce maintenance requirements, or add new capabilities to selected lanterns. Your first experimental project involves upgrading the oil distribution system for the floating lanterns. The current arrangement requires weekly boat trips to refill individual reservoirs, a time-consuming process that becomes dangerous during rough weather. You design a modified system that uses enlarged reservoirs and more efficient wick assemblies to extend burning time between service visits. The modification proves successful after weeks of testing and adjustment. Burning time for the affected lanterns increases from 7 days to nearly 3 weeks, dramatically reducing maintenance requirements while improving reliability during stormy periods. The success encourages you to consider other improvements that could be implemented during future summer maintenance cycles. Your second major project addresses the challenge of winter ice damage to shoreline fixtures. Several lanterns suffer recurring problems with mounting hardware loosened by freeze-thaw cycles, requiring repeated repairs that could be avoided with better cold weather protection. You develop an enhanced mounting system that uses expansion joints and flexible connections to absorb thermal stress without compromising structural integrity. The technical work provides intellectual satisfaction that complements the routine maintenance duties you've grown to appreciate. Problem solving at this level requires both magical knowledge and mechanical understanding, combining theoretical principles with practical experience in ways that make optimal use of your modest but well-developed skills. Summer also brings deeper exploration of the lake itself, as you use the reduced activity period to investigate areas and phenomena that remain mysterious despite months of observation. Working from a small boat equipped with specialized instruments borrowed from the castle's equipment stores, you begin mapping the underwater features that affect lantern positioning and magical current flows. The lake's depth varies dramatically, from shallow margins suitable for wading to profound deeps that your measuring line cannot reach. Underwater rock formations create current patterns that affect floating lantern stability, while magical springs generate thermal anomalies that prevent ice formation even in the coldest weather. Most intriguingly, you discover evidence of artificial structures beneath the water, stone foundations and carved pillars that suggest the lake once supported buildings or monuments now lost to history. These underwater investigations bring you into closer contact with the lake's magical inhabitants. The giant squid seems particularly curious about your research activities, often surfacing nearby to observe your work with what appears to be intelligent interest. On several occasions, the creature actively assists by retrieving measuring weights that sink too deep for manual recovery, or by gently repositioning your boat when strong currents threaten to interfere with delicate observations. The grindylows prove less helpful, but equally fascinating. These underwater humanoids maintain complex territorial arrangements that become apparent through careful observation of their movement patterns. Understanding their behavioral cycles helps explain why certain lanterns experience recurring problems with positioning charms. The creatures seem to regard some fixtures as boundary markers for their territories, and occasionally attempt to relocate them according to their own mysterious purposes. Your relationship with Hagrid deepens during the summer months, as reduced school activity provides more opportunities for collaboration on lake-related projects. His knowledge of magical creatures complements your growing understanding of the lake's physical and magical properties, creating opportunities for joint investigations that neither of you could accomplish alone. One particularly memorable collaboration involves tracking down the source of unusual disturbances affecting several floating lanterns. The fixtures have been drifting from their assigned positions despite properly functioning positioning charms, suggesting external interference rather than mechanical failure. Working together, you and Hagrid discover that a family of kelpies has taken up residence in a previously unexplored section of the lake, their presence generating magical currents strong enough to overpower standard positioning enchantments. The solution requires delicate negotiation rather than force, as kelpies are protected magical creatures whose territorial rights must be respected. Hagrid's expertise in creature communication proves essential for establishing an understanding that allows the kelpies to remain in their chosen habitat, while modifying the affected positioning charms to compensate for their magical influence. Summer evenings provide the most peaceful moments of your year as you complete final maintenance rounds while the sun sets over the Highland Mountains. The lake becomes mirror smooth in the evening calm, reflecting not just the surrounding landscape, but also the carefully maintained network of lights that mark safe passage through these ancient waters. As your first full year as Lantern Keeper draws toward its close, you feel a deep satisfaction in how completely the work has suited your temperament and abilities. The combination of technical challenges, seasonal variety, and meaningful service to the Hogwarts community has created a life that feels both purposeful and sustainable. Part 6: Autumn's Return and Deeper Mysteries. September brings the familiar excitement of a new academic year beginning. But this time you experience it from the established perspective of someone who belongs to Hogwarts' permanent community, rather than as an uncertain newcomer. The returning students include familiar faces from your spring encounters, young people who greet you with recognition and respect earned through a year of competent service. Your reputation has solidified over the summer months through word-of-mouth stories shared among students and staff. You're known as the reliable keeper who rescued stranded students during last autumn's storm, who helped recover valuable equipment lost in the lake, and who can be counted on to provide assistance and advice for any lake-related activities. The recognition feels good without being overwhelming, acknowledgement of competence without unwanted attention. The autumn maintenance routine follows patterns established during your first year, but refined through experience and confidence. You understand now which lanterns require early attention as temperatures drop, which seasonal adjustments prevent winter problems, and how to balance routine maintenance with the increased activity that comes with the school year's beginning. But your second year also brings awareness of deeper mysteries surrounding the lantern network that weren't apparent during your initial learning period. Careful observation over multiple seasonal cycles reveals patterns that suggest the lights serve purposes beyond simple navigation and illumination. The most intriguing discovery involves the synchronized behavior patterns that certain lanterns exhibit during specific astronomical events. On nights when particular stars reach certain positions, groups of lanterns begin pulsing in complex rhythms that seem too coordinated to be coincidental. The patterns change with different celestial configurations, suggesting a connection between the lantern network and ancient astronomical observations. Your investigation into these phenomena leads to research in the castle's library, where you spend evening hours studying texts on magical astronomy, ancient lighting systems, and the history of Hogwarts construction. The work reveals that the current lantern network incorporates elements dating back to the school's founding, with some fixtures occupying positions that have been continuously illuminated for nearly 1,000 years. More intriguingly, you discover references to the Lake Wardens in medieval texts, a group of magical practitioners whose responsibilities included maintaining protective lights around bodies of water. The descriptions of their duties and techniques bear striking similarities to your own work, suggesting that your position continues a tradition far older than the current school administration realizes. These historical connections take on practical significance when you begin experimenting with traditional techniques mentioned in the ancient texts. Several lanterns respond remarkably well to maintenance procedures described in centuries-old manuals, burning more steadily and requiring less frequent attention when serviced according to medieval protocols rather than modern methods. The most dramatic example involves a particularly temperamental floating lantern that has required weekly attention since your arrival. Following procedures outlined in a 14th century treatise on water light harmonies, you discover that the fixture responds to lunar cycle timing for maintenance activities. Servicing the lantern during specific moon phases reduces its maintenance requirements from weekly to monthly, while improving its resistance to weather disturbances. These discoveries lead to correspondence with scholars at other magical institutions who study historical lighting systems. Your practical experience with functioning ancient installations provides valuable data for their theoretical research, while their historical knowledge helps you understand the deeper principles underlying your daily work. But the most significant development of your second autumn involves an encounter that fundamentally changes your understanding of the lake's magical ecosystem. While conducting routine evening maintenance on a clear October night, you witness something that Moorcock's extensive notes never mentioned: the emergence from the lake's depths of a figure that can only be described as a spirit or guardian. The entity appears first as a disturbance in the water near your boat, then resolves into a translucent humanoid form that stands on the lake's surface as if it were solid ground. The figure observes your work with evident interest, but without threat, its presence creating a sense of ancient wisdom and patient watchfulness that makes you understand immediately that you're in the presence of something far older and more significant than any creature you've previously encountered. The spirit, for lack of a better term, seems particularly interested in your lantern maintenance activities. It moves closer to observe your wick trimming technique, nods approvingly when you adjust oil flow rates, and gestures in ways that suggest corrections to your positioning of floating fixtures. Most remarkably, several lanterns that have been burning with irregular flames suddenly stabilize when the entity directs its attention toward them. The encounter lasts perhaps 20 minutes before the spirit withdraws back into the lake's depths. But the experience leaves you profoundly changed in your understanding of your role and responsibilities. You're not simply maintaining mechanical devices. You're participating in an ancient magical system that maintains balance and protection for the entire lake environment. Subsequent research reveals oblique references to lake spirits in Hogwarts historical documents, though most treat them as folklore rather than factual accounts. But your direct experience cannot be dismissed, and over the following weeks, you begin noticing subtle signs of the entity's continued presence and influence. Lanterns that previously required constant adjustment now maintain stable operation for extended periods. Equipment failures that once required complex repairs resolve themselves overnight. Most significantly, the positioning charms on floating lanterns become more resistant to magical interference, as if reinforced by power beyond your own modest abilities. These developments create a sense of partnership in your work that transforms routine maintenance from mere technical duty into participation in something larger and more meaningful. You begin to understand that your role as lantern keeper carries responsibilities and privileges that extend far beyond what appears in any job description or training manual. As winter approaches and you prepare for your second season of cold weather operations, you carry new knowledge about the depth and significance of the work you've undertaken. The simple assignment that brought you to Hogwarts has revealed itself as a calling that connects you to centuries of tradition and binds you to the protection of something ancient and essential. Part 7. The Deep Seasons and Mastery. Your third year as Hogwarts Lantern Keeper begins with the confidence that comes from genuine mastery of complex skills. The daily routines that once required careful attention and constant reference to written instructions now flow with the unconscious competence of true expertise. You can diagnose lantern problems by subtle changes in flame color, predict weather patterns by observing how different fixtures respond to atmospheric pressure, and maintain the entire network with an efficiency that would have seemed impossible during your uncertain early months. The work has become deeply integrated into your sense of identity and purpose. You no longer think of yourself as someone who happens to tend lanterns. You are the lantern keeper, guardian of lights that have burned continuously for centuries, inheritor of knowledge and responsibilities that connect you to generations of predecessors who understood the profound importance of maintaining these beacons in the darkness. Your relationship with the lake spirit has developed into something approaching partnership, though the entity appears infrequently and communication remains largely gestural. When problems arise that exceed your technical abilities, the spirit sometimes manifests to observe your efforts, occasionally offering subtle guidance through positioning suggestions or directing your attention to solutions you might otherwise miss. These supernatural interventions have taught you that the lantern network operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The visible mechanical and magical components represent only the surface layer of a much deeper system that includes the lake's natural magical currents, the spiritual guardianship of ancient entities, and protective enchantments woven into the very foundations of Hogwarts itself. Understanding these deeper connections has transformed your approach to maintenance and troubleshooting. Instead of viewing each lantern as an isolated device requiring individual attention, you now work with awareness of the network as a unified organism, where changes in one component affect the behavior of distant fixtures through pathways that are felt rather than understood intellectually. This holistic perspective proves especially valuable during your third winter, when an unprecedented magical storm descends from the northern mountains, with winds carrying energies that disrupt normal protective enchantments. Standard weather protection charms prove inadequate against the supernatural forces, and several lanterns begin exhibiting erratic behavior that threatens the entire network's stability. The crisis requires innovation, beyond anything in Moorcock's notes or the traditional texts you've studied. Working through 3 days of continuous effort, you develop hybrid protective techniques that combine mechanical adjustments, enhanced magical shielding, and most importantly, deliberate harmonization with the lake's natural magical rhythms, rather than resistance against them. The solution involves temporarily modifying the entire network to pulse in synchronization with the storm's magical frequencies, essentially camouflaging the lanterns within the chaotic energies, rather than trying to shield them completely. The technique works, but only because your years of careful observation have taught you to recognize and work with magical patterns that most wizards would never notice. The successful resolution of this crisis establishes your reputation as someone whose expertise extends far beyond routine maintenance. Word spreads through the castle that the Lantern Keeper not only maintains the lights, but understands their deeper magical significance and can adapt them to extraordinary circumstances. This recognition brings increased responsibility as you're consulted on magical lighting projects throughout Hogwarts grounds. You advise on modifications to the castle's interior illumination systems, assist with outdoor lighting for special events, and provide certified expertise for research projects investigating the intersection of magical and mundane lighting technologies. But the most significant development involves your role in training the next generation of groundskeeping staff. Hagrid, now in his 60s and beginning to consider succession planning, asks you to develop formal training materials for magical groundskeeping techniques that could be used to prepare future staff members. The project forces you to systematize knowledge that exists largely in practical experience and intuitive understanding, creating written procedures for techniques like reading flame signatures for weather prediction, or harmonizing positioning charms with natural magical currents, requires translating felt knowledge into communicable instruction. The work also reveals how much specialized expertise you've accumulated through years of patient observation and experimentation. Techniques you consider routine prove remarkably sophisticated when explained to others, representing innovations that advance the field of magical maintenance beyond traditional approaches. Your formal documentation efforts attract attention from the Ministry of Magic's Department for Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, whose responsibilities include oversight of magical groundskeeping at educational institutions. A senior official visits Hogwarts to review your procedures, and is sufficiently impressed to request copies for distribution to other magical schools. This official recognition feels gratifying, but also slightly overwhelming. You accepted the Lantern Keeper position, seeking quiet, meaningful work away from public attention. The expertise you've developed has inadvertently made you something of an authority on magical lighting systems, with responsibilities that extend beyond your original intentions. But the core satisfaction of the work remains unchanged. Each evening's maintenance rounds continue to provide the meditative routine that anchors your daily life. The gentle rhythm of checking gauges, trimming wicks, and ensuring optimal fuel levels creates a space for reflection and connection with the ancient traditions you've inherited. As your 4th year approaches, you've begun to understand that your time as Lantern Keeper represents not just employment, but apprenticeship in arts and knowledge that few people have the opportunity to learn. The skills you're developing, the relationships you're building with magical entities, and the deep understanding you're gaining of how ancient systems function will define the rest of your life in ways you're only beginning to appreciate. The young person who arrived at Hogwarts seeking simple, honest work has become the guardian of something far more complex and significant. A keeper of lights that represent continuity, safety, and the enduring power of careful attention to essential details that others take for granted. And so your story concludes not with grand adventures or dramatic revelations, but with the quiet satisfaction of essential work mastered and traditions preserved through patient dedication. You've spent years beside the Black Lake, transforming from an uncertain young keeper into the guardian of lights that have guided countless souls safely through dark waters. Your legacy isn't written in history books or celebrated in great halls, but burns steadily in the network of lanterns that continue their ancient watch because of your careful attention, your innovative spirit, and your deep respect for the responsibilities you've inherited. Each flame that burns through Highland storms, each light that guides lost travelers to safety, each beacon that marks the boundary between the known and unknown, all represent the accumulated wisdom of your quiet service. The routine that once seemed simple has revealed itself as profoundly complex, connecting you to magical currents that flow deeper than the lake itself, to spiritual guardians who have watched over these waters for centuries, and to traditions that bind the present to an ancient past when light was humanity's first defense against the darkness. Your story reminds us that heroism often comes dressed in work clothes and carries maintenance tools, that the most important work happens in the margins where few people look, and that sometimes the greatest magic lies not in dramatic spells, but in the patient tending of things that must never be allowed to fail. You found more than employment beside the Black Lake. You discovered a calling that transformed routine maintenance into sacred duty, that turned technical expertise into deep wisdom, and that made you part of something larger and more enduring than any individual life. The lanterns continue to burn because you learned to tend them with more than mechanical skill, because you understood that light is hope made visible, and because you accepted responsibility for maintaining beacons that guide others safely through whatever darkness they face. As we settle into sleep ourselves, we can take comfort in knowing that somewhere in the realm of imagination, the gentle work continues. The quiet dedication of those who tend the lights that matter. The patient wisdom of those who understand that small acts of care accumulate into great protection, and the humble service of those who ensure that guidance remains available for any who need to find their way. Rest well, my friends. May your dreams be filled with the gentle glow of well-tended lights, the satisfaction of essential work completed with skill and love, and the quiet pride that comes from knowing your efforts make the world a little safer, a little brighter, a little more hopeful for all who follow.